Welcome to this Virtual Scholars Day presentation. Just a little housekeeping. Please make sure your microphone and video are muted and your computer sound is turned on. Scholars Day is hosted by the Carl Goodson Honors Program and sponsored by OBU's Alpha Tau Student Honor Organization. Scholars Day focuses on the academic achievements accomplished throughout the school year by students from various disciplines. The presentations and papers are digitally archived on OBU's Scholarly Commons. Today's presentation is by Brooke Sanderford, a senior majoring in Communication Sciences and Disorders and Spanish. Brooke, are you ready to begin your presentation?
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay. You can share your screen whenever you are ready.
Okay. Okay, 1 second. What? Oh, there it is. Okay, sorry. Okay. So the title of my thesis is Village Saints and a Little Black Magic, the benefits of a mission trip opportunity for natural science students in culturally diverse Southern Mexico. So the reason that I chose to use Prezi instead of PowerPoint is I really like how it comes back to this screen of kind of showing the big picture, what the big picture is. And the goal for my thesis and for this research is to decide and figure out what would be the benefits of a mission trip opportunity for natural science students, but also more specifically for students who have the same major as me, which is communication sciences and disorders. So we'll start just looking a little bit more about how I ended up in Oaxaca, Mexico. So if you didn't know, I took a trip to Oaxaca, Mexico the summer of 2019 with another professor named Dr. Hardman, and the two of us ended up there to kind of do an exploratory mission trip with the hopes of starting an annual trip for other communication sciences and disorders majors. So how did we, two people from Arkadelphia at Ouachita, end up in Oaxaca, Mexico? Well, it all started with my directed study, which I was doing with Harding University. I was conducting interviews to learn more about a program they have called His Path, which stands for Harding University in Zambia Speech Language Pathology. And basically they take graduate students for a 6-week mission trip to Zambia to minister to the people there with speech pathology, their skills they have from speech pathology, and they go and they help the people there. And so my directed study was conducting interviews to learn more about this program. And one day I was talking to Dr. Hardman, and she said, what do you want to do with these interviews? Like, once you learn more about this, what do you want to do? And she presented the idea of starting a trip for communication disorders majors. And so we were like, how do we do this? Well, we knew we needed a travel grant. We needed the money to go. And so I started making phone calls and finally ended up getting in contact with a missionary friend from Oaxaca, Mexico named Rod. I applied for a grant. I was able to get the money and I had the Ouachita seal of approval to go. And so before I knew it, Dr. Hardman and I were on our way to Oaxaca, Mexico to do an exploratory trip to meet the people, the missionaries, taste the food, walk the streets, and see if it would be possible for a group of students to return later on in the following year. So going back to the big picture, looking at the benefits and why it would be beneficial for us to go, the first thing that we need to look at is becoming students with a global mindset and why Ouachita sees it as important for students to engage with the world. So Ouachita has a mission statement that states, the university prepares individuals for ongoing intellectual and spiritual growth, lives of meaningful work, and reasoned engagement with the world. And if you look a little further and go a little bit deeper, the CMDS, Communication Sciences and Disorders mission statement, also includes a similar remark, which states, enable all individuals to communicate, read and write, think and learn in order to succeed in an ever-changing world. And so clearly Ouachita sees it as important for students to engage with the world around them, but also engage with cultures outside of your own, to engage with people that are different to us and to yourself. So Ouachita stresses that as an importance. And Ouachita does have outlets for students to go study abroad, but most of their missionship opportunities happen through the School of Christian Studies. And so what I was hoping to do was be able to start a mission trip specifically for our program that would happen annually to encourage students to see the benefit that every major has an opportunity to go and to share the love of Christ. So I just wanted to see if other universities were doing this. So I looked at 5 total Christian universities that have a communication sciences and disorders major to see if any of these universities were providing mission trip opportunities for their undergraduate students. And of the 5 that I looked at, none of them were. There were a few that talked about the importance of studying abroad, but as a whole, mission trip opportunities were not prevalent in the Department of Communication Sciences and Disorders. So I believe that Ouachita has a unique opportunity to provide a mission trip opportunity for their students who are natural science majors that a lot of other universities are not doing. And so it's just a really unique opportunity for Ouachita to do this. I was worried though, because the exploratory trip, I quickly learned that what ROD does in Mexico is mostly medical based, so providing eyeglasses, giving out prescription meds, seeing a dentist, that these were ROD's focus in Mexico. And so I was worried about how speech pathology played into that and what would be our role there. But quickly, I learned after further research into journals and other publications with our professional organization known as American Speech Language Hearing Association, also known as ASHA, I quickly realized how easily speech language pathology did indeed have a solid connection to serving those from other cultures and language groups. In a recent article published by ASHA, ASHA describes the importance of speech language pathologists being equipped to display cultural competence, which is defined as one's ability to function effectively in culturally diverse situations. And cultural competence is a topic that we're required to cover in both undergrad and graduate studies because ASHA sees it as very important. And in this article, they went on to explain that the best way to gain cultural competence is to engage with cultures outside of your own. And so I quickly saw the connection between going abroad and gaining cultural competence and how this helps us as students be better speech pathologists in the future. So I think the biggest point to look at and the thing my thesis focused the most on was the culture of Oaxaca and just who they are and how aspects of their culture affect the spread of religion. And in my thesis, I talk more about how other people who have researched their culture and kind of who they are and the ancient people. But in my presentation, I'm going to talk more about the things that I learned and saw while I was in Mexico. So the first thing that I want to focus on is just the terrain itself. So the picture is taken from Oaxaca City, and Oaxaca City is in a valley, but the villages where Rod goes on these medical mission trips are in the mountains over here. And so these villages are very isolated and do not have a lot of contact with urban society. They don't have access to modern medicine, and that is why Rod sees his mission as something that is very important and very helpful for these people, because coming into the city is really hard, but if Rod can take that to them, then they are more willing to open their community and allow him to come in, and he can share the love of Christ with them. So we were able to go while I was there for our exploratory trip and help people try on glasses. There was a dentist that came with us and also a doctor. So their isolation definitely affects the spread of religion and makes it a little bit more difficult. Also, everything there, especially in the village, is handmade. It truly seems like every aspect of village life is touched by someone's hands. You can see even in this picture, they don't have an electric stove or even a gas burning stove. They have a fire to cook all their food. And so every part is done by hand. It's not like at Rosa's where they have the machines to make all the tortillas. They're pressing them by hand. And so that is something that their isolation has caused them to rely on more ancient practices and more less modernized skills, I guess. Again, here's a picture of the food that we had in the village. The women spent all day working and making this food for us, and it was delicious. And they just really believe that everyone in the community needs to play a role. And so for the women, that's making food and making a home, but also it can be the fact that like the village elders are going to rotate every 2 years, and everyone's required to like do a community service role, but also have a leadership role, because they see community as so important and that everyone should play a role at some point. Back to handmade things and just how you can truly see how isolated some of these communities are. They all hand make bricks. They go into this pit, dig out mud, and make the bricks by hand. In another village, we were able to see a man who hand makes rugs, and here's his equipment. He uses all natural dyes and all natural wool to weave these beautiful rugs. And then they can take them to the markets to sell. So another thing is Zapotec people, those are the indigenous people who live in these mountains, really desire for things to stay in balance. And so not only does their isolation affect, not only does their isolation affect the spread of religion, but also their desire to keep things in balance. And that's a lot of times another reason why they continue practicing these older traditional things of making food and making rugs. Also, their dual heritage is really prominent. So like I said, the Zapotec people are the indigenous people that live there, but they are greatly affected by the Spanish colonialism. And you can see that even in just their churches, and Catholicism is really prominent because of the Spanish conquest, but there's also this strange mix of Indian tradition, of indigenous tradition. And so like even, I think that is so prominently seen in this building. The stones that you see here are actually from Zapotec temples that the Spanish people tore down and then used the stones from the temples to build their own places of worship. So here's another picture of that. They have really elaborate cathedrals with gold, and they really emphasize the importance of the Virgin Mary, and also of saints in general, they see as really important. And so each village is named after a saint, and they like worship these saints sometimes even more than God. And so that's where their religion is just kind of weird and very different. And that's why it is important for people to be going, for Christians to go share the good news that they do not have to worship a saint in order to get in contact with God, but that they can have access to him. So another way we see this mix of tradition is this was in a Jesuit church, and there are these eggs and candles and bread in this picture, and they were going to have an indigenous person come in and perform this like black magic mystical tradition to help provide healing for this boy that is pictured. And so we just really see, even in the churches, how this mix and clash of culture is just so prominent. And it really overlaps in everything they do. Okay, this is going to play, and then I'll talk about it. Hopefully you can hear it. Okay, so what that was a parade that we saw while we were there in one of the villages, and they have these parades all the time to honor different saints. It is so much a part of their culture that almost even more than a religion, it's just a part of their daily lives to have these parades and celebrations. And they might not go to mass at all, but they'll participate in these parades because they see it as so important and so just like deeply embedded in their culture that sometimes they don't even recognize that it is like a religious celebration. It's just a part of who they are. And so while the need to go and share the good news is so important, there's also some evangelical churches in some of these villages. And so this bottom left video that I'm about to play is an example of one of those. Be careful, it might be loud on your video if you can hear it. And it's just people who are able to go to church and just them praising God through what they have, their instruments. So we'll watch that now. Okay, so yes, there are Christians there and they're praising God, and we got to be a part of that, and that was really awesome. So ultimately, the heart behind going, how does this play into the big picture? Why should we go now that we know more about their culture? I think the first one is a little bit cliche, but it's true. According to Matthew 28, we are all called to go. We are all called to live on mission where we are, but also this experience and this opportunity to go to Mexico is a part of the Great Commission. And as believers, we should be looking for ways to spread the gospel, and this is just one outlet to do that. So that's one reason that we should go. Also, there is religious persecution in the villages in Oaxaca because community is so important. Sometimes when someone chooses to follow the Lord and not to worship these saints anymore, they are excluded from the community. And Rod, while he goes to share the gospel, but he also goes to encourage these people and provide them with resources that they've been cut off from. This is just a picture in the village, so you can see what a village may look like. There is not religious persecution there, it's the one with the church in it. But that is something that is a problem, and Rod needs teams to go with him to be able to go into these communities, to be able to provide these services for the elders to allow him to come in. And so that way he can not only make disciples, but to encourage them and walk alongside with them as they learn to walk with the Lord. And lastly, ultimately, going on mission does benefit us as believers because it teaches us more about the character of God. Um, I once heard in a conversation about culture and living missionally that different cultures reflect God's character. And I just think that Mexican culture really reflects God's desire for community. They live that so well in their everyday lives. And so it teaches us more about who God is. It humbles us to want to serve the people in our own neighborhoods and our own communities better. And so that is why I think going to Oaxaca, Mexico as a CMDS major would be so important, and how it could benefit not only the people in Mexico, but also the students as well. So the last part of my thesis was supposed to talk about what it would look like for a student to plan a trip. And basically these 3 points came out of one of the interviews I did with Harding, and they just really stressed the importance of having a faculty on board who will support you, establishing a connection in an international location, which we have through ROD, and then also look at a budget with the department specifically, but also with the university as a whole. Part of my thesis was supposed to talk about the trip and what we learned as students, and a return trip, I mean. So going back with a group of students to be able to begin this annual mission trip and not just have an exploratory trip with Dr. Hardman, but to take students. But we were unable to go back because of COVID-19. And so we're really sad about that, but hopefully this has laid the groundwork for someone to take over in the future. So at this point, if you have any questions, I would be happy to take questions.
Hey, Brooke.
Yes.
Oh, hang on, let me put on my video.
Okay.
Hey,
Hey.
great job. So I was kind of thinking about, like, you, it's communication and disorders, but they do medical and dental. Would it be a trip that pre-med, dental, nursing, and communication disorders students could go on together? And then if that was the case, like, what would the communication disorder, what would you see the CSD students doing?
So yes, I think in the future, it definitely could be something that would include the greater natural sciences, the School of Natural Sciences. The reason that we were keeping it for CMDS students initially was it's just a more organized group. It would keep it smaller. There'd be less like applications we'd have to go through. And so just to limit the number of students going. But ultimately, I think it would end up including natural science students. And something that Rod really stressed while we were there, when we were asking him, like, what would more people do if more people came? And he just talks about, like, everyone plays a role, whether it's like you spending time with children so that way parents will come receive these medical services, or you handing out prescription pills, or you cleaning instruments for the dentist. That everyone does have a specific role. He shared a story of a man who came and really wanted to do the medical part, but Rod said, no, I need you to make balloon animals so the kids will like be entertained, and so the parents will feel comfortable to come do the medicine. At first he was really upset about that, but then he saw the benefit that making balloon animals could have, and how that did draw kids in and allowed the parents to feel more comfortable. And he has since returned on mission trips, and he's like known as the balloon man. And so I think, and he takes so much pride in doing that. So I think that having more students who do a variety of things would expose all of us to just the importance of being willing to do anything, if that's making balloons or if it's passing out pills, that all of us like can play a role, even if it's not what we're specifically trained in.
So just another little follow-up, since you know a little Spanish too, if you did have a chance to, say, interact with the people or the kids, a little bit, and well, you'd be in Spanish, but a lot of students who would go wouldn't be able to speak Spanish. So what could communication science disorder students learn from just listening to the dialect? I don't know, just to relate it a little bit to your CS&D.
Yeah, I think it would take a lot of preparation to like really know what we could do as like CMDS majors. But I think just like listening to dialects and just recognizing how if we were able to go to more than one village, even within different villages, there are different dialects. And just being able to like observe that. I think in the future, if CMDS were to continue to play a major role, that you could take like language tests just to see like where the kids and students at in their language development. Do the Spanish books that are made for American kids, do they would it translate well? And you could do some language assessments, but with 1 week it wouldn't be enough to really like start treatment. It would just be more observation. Also, whenever we were in one Zapotec village, we got to hear them as we were driving in. It's the village where the dentist is from, and they started like whistling to him, and we learned just that even like these different villages have whistles to communicate. So Atepec was the village that we went to, and they are the only village that uses these whistles to communicate. So even just learning that like communication goes even above like verbal, it can be like whistles and clicks, but that only certain communities will understand. That was really interesting also.
Thank you very much, Brooke. Are there any other questions? Well, thank you very much for watching this presentation. You can view this presentation and others at scholarlycommons.obu.edu. I hope you guys have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you.